You want me to leave your seat. Security will escort you out if you don't move." Petra Osi didn't move. She was 26 years old, sitting in a folding chair in the back row of a school board hearing room in Brampton, Ontario, and the man talking to her was wearing a lanyard that said District Administrator in block letters. She looked at the lanyard. She looked at him. Then she looked back at the papers in her lap. "I'm the parent of a student enrolled in this district," Petra said. "I have every right to be here." The administrator, a man named Jeffrey Coulter, made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Parent, right." He turned back to the panel table and lowered himself into his chair like nothing had happened. The room was small, drop ceiling, fluorescent lights, a projector screen at the front showing a PowerPoint titled Halton Ridge Scholarship Selection, Final Cohort. 8 people sat behind the long table, 3 lawyers, 2 senior administrators, 1 communications director with a laptop open, 1 trustee from the school board, and Jeffrey Coulter, who ran the district's private academic partnership program, and had, in Petra's opinion, the handshake of a man who had never once been told no. Her daughter was not on that slide. Her daughter should have been. Let me be honest with you about something. I have followed a lot of these stories. School boards, scholarship committees, institutional decisions made in rooms exactly like this one, with fluorescent lights exactly like those, and people exactly like Jeffrey Coulter sitting behind long tables. I've watched families walk away with nothing. I've watched systems designed to look fair be used to protect the people running them. This one was different. And the reason it was different was a 26-year-old woman who used to clear buildings in Kandahar and had learned a long time ago that the first person who looks away loses. Petra didn't look away once. She had grown up in Brampton. Her mother, Cecilia Osi, had immigrated from Accra in 1989 with $40 and a nursing credential that Ontario didn't recognize for 3 years. Cecilia cleaned hospital rooms while she waited for the paperwork. Then she cleaned rooms while she studied. Then she passed her equivalency exams and started working the floor at Peel Memorial. Night shifts, double shifts every Christmas for 11 years. She raised Petra in a 2-bedroom apartment on Kennedy Road. They had a second-hand couch and a library card, and a rule that homework got done before dinner, not after. Petra enlisted at 20. 2 tours in Afghanistan with the Royal Canadian Regiment. She came back with a knee that locked in cold weather, and a way of reading rooms that most people don't develop until they're twice her age. She finished her BA online. She got a job doing security risk assessment for a logistics company downtown. She had a daughter named Juliana, 7 years old, sharp as a blade, who had been reading since she was 4, and who had won her school's science fair 2 years in a row with projects that her teacher, a young woman named Ms. Bouchard, had told Petra were more sophisticated than anything she'd seen from students twice Juliana's age. The Halton Ridge Academic Excellence Scholarship was worth $40,000. Full tuition and boarding at Halton Ridge Academy, a private school in Burlington, with a robotics lab and a debate team that had placed nationally 3 years running. Every year, the district's partnership program selected 1 student from the public school system to attend on full scholarship. The criterion was simple: academic merit and demonstrated potential. Juliana Osi had been nominated by Ms. Bouchard in October. In February, a letter came. "We regret to inform you that Juliana has not been selected for the current cohort. Due to the confidential nature of the selection process, we are unable to share evaluative details." That was the whole letter. 2 sentences. No reviewer names, no rubric, no explanation. Petra read it twice. Then she called the district office. The receptionist told her the selection committee's decisions were final. She asked to speak with someone on the committee. The receptionist said that wasn't possible. She asked for the selection criteria in writing. The receptionist said that information was not publicly available. She called back the next morning. Same answer. Different voice. Same answer. She filed a Freedom of Information request, under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The district responded 28 days later, which was the maximum allowable delay. The response was 17 pages of blacked-out text and 3 sentences of actual content, none of which told her anything she didn't already know. The student who received the scholarship was a boy named Elliot. He attended Halton Ridge Academy's junior campus. His father was on the board of a firm that had donated $200,000 to the district foundation the previous spring. Petra found that out herself. It took her 4 days and a subscription to a corporate registry database she paid for with her tax return. She didn't tell Juliana any of this. Juliana was 7. She knew her application hadn't been successful. She had cried about it once, quietly, in her room. Then she had gotten up and asked Petra if they could go to the library, because she wanted to find a book about rocket propulsion. Petra drove her to the library. She watched her daughter pull 3 books off the shelf and sit down on the floor cross-legged and start reading. Then Petra went home and started building a file. The hearing had been the hardest part to get into. The district didn't advertise these sessions. Petra had found the date on a board meeting agenda posted to the website at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, buried under 6 other agenda items in a document formatted to be as unreadable as possible. She had set an alarm. She had shown up. The panel was now 40 minutes into reviewing what Jeffrey called the cohort selection process. Slides, charts, language about holistic evaluation and community-based criteria. Not one word about what holistic meant, not one rubric, not one score. Petra's hand went up. Coulter looked at her the way you look at a car alarm going off in a parking lot. Public comment is at the end of the session, Ms. Osei, Petra Osei, and I understand. I'm not making a comment. I have a procedural question under the board's own governance bylaws. Coulter's mouth thinned. The trustee at the end of the table, a woman named Diane something, shifted in her seat. The panel chair, a man named Arthur Pemberton, looked up from his laptop. Go ahead. Arthur was 63. He had been on the district education panel for 9 years. He had reading glasses that he wore, pushed up on his forehead, and took down only when he was actually reading something. And Petra had watched him take them down exactly once in the last 40 minutes. He seemed, unlike Coulter, like a man who was still capable of being surprised by things. Under Section 4.3 of the district's scholarship selection charter, Petra said, "The evaluating committee is required to document individual scoring metrics for each nominated candidate and retain those records for a period of not less than 2 years." She paused. Can the panel confirm those records exist for the current cohort cycle? Coulter was already shaking his head. That's not the purpose of. Arthur looked at Coulter. Let her finish. Petra kept her voice flat, even. The way she had been taught to give reports when she was 21 years old and standing in front of a captain who had heard every excuse and didn't want to hear another one. I am asking because I filed an MFIPPA request in March. The district responded with redacted documents and indicated that no individual scoring rubrics had been generated for the 23 to 24 cohort. Her eyes went to Pemberton. If that's accurate, the selection committee was not in compliance with its own charter when it made this decision. The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of a panel hearing. The other kind. The kind that happens when someone says something out loud that everyone in the room already knew and had hoped would not be said out loud. Coulter cleared his throat. Our process fully complies with all applicable. Section 4.3, Petra said again. Individual scoring metrics, retained for 2 years. Do they exist or not? Coulter looked at the communications director. The communications director looked at his laptop. The trustee looked at the ceiling. Arthur Pemberton took his glasses off his forehead and put them on. He turned to Coulter. Jeffrey, do the records exist? Coulter said something about administrative discretion and the intent of the charter and the confidential nature of the process. He said it very smoothly. He had been practicing law for 22 years, and he was good at filling silences with words that sounded like answers but weren't. Petra had spent 2 years in a country where smooth talk could get people killed. She had learned to hear the space between the words. She reached into her bag and set a document on the table in front of her. She didn't approach the panel. She didn't need to. I'd like to enter into the record a letter sent by this district's own legal counsel to the Halton Education Foundation in December of last year. She held it up. In this letter, counsel confirms that the scoring rubric requirement under Section 4.3 was, and I'm quoting directly, suspended for the 23 to 24 pilot cycle pending review of revised selection framework. She set the letter down. The rubric wasn't suspended because the process was under review. It was suspended before the nominations were even open, before any student applied, before my daughter wrote a single word of her application. She looked at Pemberton, not at Coulter. The committee changed the rules before the race started and didn't tell anyone. Coulter was on his feet. This is, I have to object to the framing of. You're not in a courtroom, Petra said. You don't get to object. It was the only sharp thing she said the whole session. The only moment she let any of it out. One sentence. Then she went quiet and let the room do what rooms do when a lie runs out of road. Arthur Pemberton was very still. He had stopped writing. He was looking at the letter Petra was holding, the one from the district's own legal counsel, the one she had found not through the MFIPPA request, but through a public board filing from the foundation's charitable registration. A document that anyone could access and almost no one thought to look for. Where did you find that? He asked. The Canada Revenue Agency's Charity Information Return Database, Petra said. It's public. It just takes a while to read. Arthur took his glasses off, set them on the table, and looked at Jeffrey Coulter for a long moment. Coulter's jaw was tight. He said something about context and framing and the complexity of multi-stakeholder selection processes. Arthur said, very quietly, "Sit down, Jeffrey." Jeffrey sat down. There was a recess. Petra stood in the hallway. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. The vending machine at the end buzzed. She had a cup of coffee from a machine down the hall that tasted like hot metal, and she drank it because she was running on 4 hours of sleep, and she had learned a long time ago that tired is a condition you manage, not one you give in to. Her phone had 2 texts, one from her mother. How did it go? No question mark. Her mother always forgot question marks. One from Ms. Bouchard, thinking of you both today. Petra stood under a fluorescent light in a hallway in Brampton and thought about Juliana sitting on the library floor with 3 books about rocket propulsion. She thought about her mother working the night shift at Peel Memorial in 1997 with hands that smelled like hospital soap. She thought about a January morning in Kandahar when she had walked into a building that wasn't supposed to be occupied and had stood very still in the doorway for 4 seconds and made a decision that had no room in it for anything other than what was true. She finished the coffee, went back in. When the panel reconvened, Arthur Pemberton spoke first. He was deliberate. He did not perform. He said what he had found, and he said what it meant, and he said it in the plainest language available to him. The district had altered a mandatory procedural requirement without disclosing the change to nominating teachers, to families, or to the public. The selection committee had made its decision for the 23 to 24 cohort without the evaluative documentation required by its own charter. The district's legal counsel had confirmed this in writing. That confirmation had been filed with a charitable foundation and was publicly accessible. He looked at Jeffrey Coulter. The panel is ordering an immediate review of the 23 to 24 scholarship selection, including all communications between committee members and the receiving family. That review will be conducted by an independent third party. All records are to be preserved effective immediately. He turned to Petra. Miss O.C., the panel apologizes that this process failed your daughter. That is not a procedural statement. I mean it. The communications director closed his laptop. The trustee, Diane, looked like she was trying to remember whether she had signed anything she shouldn't have. Jeffrey Coulter packed his briefcase. He didn't look at Petra. He didn't look at Arthur. He walked out through the side door at the kind of speed that isn't quite fast enough to look like fleeing, but is exactly fast enough that you know he wanted to. Petra watched him go. In the parking lot afterward, she sat in her car for a few minutes without starting it. The sun was coming through the windshield at the angle it comes through in March in Ontario, low and pale and more light than warmth. The kind of sun that reminds you winter isn't finished yet, but is at least considering its options. She texted her mother. It went okay. She texted Ms. Bouchard. Thank you for nominating her. It mattered. Then she drove to the school to pick up Juliana. Juliana was standing outside the main entrance with her backpack on, talking to a kid from her class about something that seemed very important. She looked up when Petra's car pulled in, said something quick to her friend, and ran over. "Did it work?" she asked, before she even had the door fully open. Petra had not told Juliana the details. She had told her that she was going to a meeting about the scholarship process. She had told her it was a boring meeting with a lot of paperwork. She had not told her about the K database or Section 4.3 or the letter from the district's legal counsel. "There's going to be a review," Petra said. Juliana climbed in and pulled her seatbelt. "What does that mean?" "It means someone's going to look at everything again. Properly this time." Juliana thought about this for a moment. Then she said, "So it's not done yet?" "Not yet," Petra said. Juliana nodded. "Okay." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a book. She had borrowed a fourth one from the school library, Fundamentals of Aerospace Engineering. It was, by Petra's rough estimate, approximately 4 times her reading level. They drove home. That was March. By June, the independent review had concluded. The findings were exactly what the letter from district counsel had implied. The scoring rubric for the 23 to 24 cycle had not been completed. 2 members of the selection committee had communicated with the receiving family in the months before selection. One email, recovered from committee records, congratulated the family 3 weeks before the official announcement date. The scholarship was rescinded. The district issued a public statement that used the phrase process irregularities 4 times and the word fraud exactly 0 times. Jeffrey Coulter resigned from his position as director of the Academic Partnership Program in May, citing a desire to pursue other opportunities. The Halton Education Foundation quietly removed his name from their website. Juliana Osei was offered the Halton Ridge Academic Excellence Scholarship for the following academic year. Full tuition and boarding. The letter, this time, was 5 paragraphs long and included a personal note from Arthur Pemberton. Petra read it twice. Then she folded it and put it on the kitchen table and called her mother. Cecilia answered on the second ring. "She got it," Petra said. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Not the empty kind. The kind that happens when a person is trying to hold something that is too big for one breath. Then Cecilia said, "I knew she would." And Petra thought about that for a long time afterward. The certainty in her mother's voice. Not hoping, not wishing, knowing. The way you know something when you have spent 30 years building the conditions for it to be possible. Quietly, without credit, cleaning hospital rooms and working night shifts and raising a daughter who walked into a school board hearing room with a document from the Canada Revenue Agency's public charity database and asked one question that nobody in that room had expected anyone to ever ask. Juliana started at Halton Ridge in September. She signed up for the robotics elective the first week. Her teacher reported to Petra at the November parent meeting, the youngest student to independently design a functional autonomous navigation model in the program's 4-year history. The teacher asked Petra if Juliana had received outside coaching. "No," Petra said. The teacher nodded slowly. "Then what prepared her for this?" Petra thought about the library floor. the 3 books about rocket propulsion, the second-hand couch on Kennedy Road, the woman at Peel Memorial who forgot question marks. She was always ready, Petra said. The school just had to be ready for her. Back in Brampton, Ms. Bouchard nominated 2 more students from her class for the following year's cohort. The district, for the first time, posted the full selection rubric on its website before nominations opened. It also posted a plain language summary of the MFIPPA process and a direct contact for the review office. Small things. The kind of things that look minor until you understand what it took to make them happen. 3 other families reached out to Petra after the review concluded. They had children who had applied to district programs in previous years. Rejections with no explanation, processes that didn't add up. They asked if she would look at their paperwork. She did. She is still looking. There's something I want to say before we're done here. Not a lesson, not a moral. Just something true. The system that failed Juliana Ose wasn't broken. It was working exactly the way it was designed to work. Quietly, confidently, counting on the fact that most people don't have the time or the tools or the refusal to accept no as a full sentence. Petra Ose had all 3. She didn't have a law degree. She didn't have connections on the panel. She didn't have anything except 2 years of service that taught her how to walk into a room without flinching, a MFIPPA request number, a CROA charity database search, and a daughter who checked out 3 books about rocket propulsion and sat down on the floor and started reading. If you know someone who's been handed a 2-sentence rejection letter and told that's the end of it, share this with them, because the end is usually just the place where the people in charge are counting on you to stop. Petra didn't stop. Neither should you.